So let's get rocking and rolling. My name is Jess Ray, and I am a workforce strategist with Crescendo Strategies. I am moderating today's event with workforce retention speaker Laura Leeton. And today marks our 6th Magnet webinar series titled Trust Through Transparency. Before we get started, just a few notes of our typical virtual training housekeeping, along with information on how to participate. As I'd mentioned, probably want to pull up that chat box. We've already got some responses here that we had requested. So just to give that information over to you, Laura, we've got a couple CEOs of some companies here. We also have a business administrator position, operations consultant, HR managers, and HR generalists as well. We will be recording this session, and again, the attendees are in listen only mode, so you don't have to worry about thinking you're on camera, okay? So don't have to fix your hair for this. But you can, again, submit the questions through the chat area. We will have some time at the end for some question and answer. If we don't have time to get to you, no worries, I'll follow up, or Laura will follow up via email. So send me those questions as we go along, and we'll make sure that those get as many as we can answered. After the session, we do recommend that if you're looking for additional resources, you visit our website at crescendostrategies.com. We also post regularly on our YouTube page, and Cara Soletto and the rest of the folks here at Crescendo have a lot of activity on LinkedIn as well. So I'd like to introduce our speaker, Laura Leeton. Laura has a natural gift for helping individuals discover their inner strengths and achieving personal and professional success. She is an expert in leadership development and coaching, and has always been drawn to leading high-performing teams. Laura built stronger leaders and teams for almost 2 decades with global Fortune 500 companies, and she understands the challenges, of course, that surround profit, people, time, and transition, and has an amazing reputation of employing a personal dynamic approach to affecting change. So with that, I will turn the presentation over to Laura.
Thank you. Thanks, Jess. Can you hear me okay? Everything good?
Great. Yes.
Okay.
Great.
So first of all, welcome. Welcome to our final portion of a Magnet Series T, Building Trust Through Transparency. I love leadership, as Jess said. I love everything about leadership. I have a passion for not only building, but repairing cultures. It's what I absolutely love to do. So this topic is very special interest for me. So before we jump into the next session, let's recap the steps to being a Magnet employer. And for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to follow us along this session, the webinars are available for your review, so you'll be able to see those. So let's jump in. So let's go ahead and recap some of what it is to be a Magnet employer, okay? The first is management effectiveness, which we all know it starts with a leader. Everything starts with a leader. Attraction and recruiting, like really getting those employees into your company and in the right roles. Guidance upon entry, so setting the stage for a successful, productive career. New staffing models, so kind of staying ahead of that curve and those changes. Empowered champions, and that's building that culture of retention that we're talking about. And last but not least, building trust through transparency. And I really encourage you all to use this Magnet approach to really improve the relationship between the employer and the employee. So let's jump into what it means to build trust through transparency. A good place to start is by looking at the new view of authority, or looking how leadership has changed, right? Understanding this will really provide insight into the new dynamics of employee needs and expectations, and ultimately lead to productivity, which is a win-win for everyone at stake. So leadership model today is very different than it's been in the past. The old directive command and control model that has its root in the Industrial Revolution focuses on the small, select number of individuals at the top that really control the majority of the bottom. And it just doesn't work anymore. It's not efficient. The new leadership model today is anchored more in an egalitarian approach. So leadership dispersed among leaders and employees, where they actually share the responsibilities and the power. So as you can see, the transparent approach to leadership that builds trust and loyalty is critical in a leadership model like today, where both the leaders and the employees share that power and responsibility. It's just not a top-down approach anymore. So let's talk about the reality of the perspective that our new workforce has in regards to transparency. And it's super important that we understand this, and why communicating the why behind our actions and our words is critical. So to start off here, Watergate happened a long time ago. I was 3 years old, so that'll give you an idea of how old I am, where we experienced scandal after scandal that followed that was uncovered by the media. So elected officials, politicians, and really respected leaders just weren't who they said they were. And quite frankly, were doing pretty bad things. So this means that your workforce coming in today won't just listen to you because you're a manager, or you're the owner, or you're the leader. They won't just believe you because you said so, okay? They won't blindly follow you and trust you because of your title, because of your role. We have to learn to trust today in both directions. Now, back in the day, new hires put their manager up on a pedestal. Now, I remember those days. I remember being the employee with my new manager thinking, wow, he was awesome. If he walked off the cliff, I'd walk off the cliff. And then I remember many years of leading that these new hires would come in and literally follow my every word. It was kind of a responsibility, honestly. Today, it's a whole different ballgame. We get a lot more pushback now. Now, another reason for this perspective we're seeing is because this generation was raised in a household where they really encouraged to ask why and to push back. They were encouraged to ask why not, why do I have to do this? Really asking questions is not disrespectful. And I still, what's funny, have this visceral response to that. I think back on what would have happened if I would have asked my coach or my teacher or my mom or my dad, well, why do I have to do that? Why? I can just feel it right now. In fact, I can see the looks on their faces if I were to ask why. Well, this is a different world now. And there's a whole new workforce created as a result of that. After scandals like Enron, for example, where the government put transparency measures like the Sarbanes-Oxley into place, which requires publicly held companies to release their annual reports, and top executive salaries were revealed. Every generation of our public expected more transparency than the generation before. So to be a great leader today, I want to reinforce again that it's always important to share the why behind our actions, the why behind our words, comments, policies, procedures, to communicate that why. And many managers honestly don't know the why. Sometimes it is their responsibility, and sometimes it's not their responsibility to know why. But if you're asking them, if a manager is asking an employee to follow a policy and a procedure and they don't know why, they're simply saying, well, corporate said so. That's just the way it is. That's the way it's been done. They can't even make an argument for it because they have no idea why the policy or the procedure is in place. So it's critical that we make sure they know why and that we communicate that. This reminded me of a great story that a friend of mine told me. he would go to his in-laws for Thanksgiving every year. And he'd be in the kitchen while his mother-in-law was cooking ham. And every year what she would do is she'd take the ham and she'd cut the ends off the ham. They'd stick it in this big pan, and then she'd stick it in the oven. And year after year after year, he would wonder, why is she cutting the ends off the ham? This is a huge pan. She doesn't need to cut the ends off the ham. Well, this year he said, I'm going to find out why. So he asked his wife, why does your mom cut the ends off the ham before she sticks it into the oven? His wife said, well, she always does it that way. We've always done it that way. That's just the way it's done. He was done with that answer. So he walked into the kitchen and he looked at his mother-in-law. He said, look, I need to know why you cut the ends off this ham before you stick it in the oven. And she said, well, back in the day, we didn't have pans that were big enough. So we had to cut the ends off so that the ham would fit before we stuck it in the oven. Asking why not only creates transparency and trust, but it also could create efficiencies and growth and change, right? So that's something to remember. Communicating the why is critical. Make sure that you know the why. If you don't, go up the chain and ask the question. It's a great way to build trust and transparency. So think about the transparency of older companies 5, 10, 20 years ago. They're much more transparent than they were in the past. They're sharing more decisions on why they're making the decisions they are, the policies they have, the rules they have in place. And honestly, public companies now are Googleable. I almost couldn't say that word, Googleable. There's much more demands on transparency now because of the scandals in social media and the generation at hand. So refrain from saying, because I said so, or that's just how it is, because it doesn't work today. They will find ways to fill that gap of the unknown. They will make it up themselves. And when they do make it up, who knows what direction it's going to go? We don't know the outcome there. So be sure to open up and communicate the why as much as possible. Now, with that said, disclaimer here, tell them as much as you can, but you don't have to disclose everything. There's some things that workers, they just don't need to know, right? Or it's sensitive and you can't share it. I can remember numerous times in leadership roles that I held where we were under reorganization or acquisitions, and there was information that I could not share. And I would have individuals come up to me and say, well, what's going to happen? Do you know this? Do you know this? I'm nervous. Share with me. And simply my response was, look, I wish I could. I do have information, but I cannot share it with you at this time. And the respect was there. The communication was there. They understood that I was in a place where I probably wanted to share, but I couldn't. And they respected that. And it created trust, and that transparency of just saying, you know what? Yes, I do know information. I just can't share it. Built a stronger relationship for me and individuals and for our team. So be prepared to explain when you can't divulge information or you really can't talk about something. That's okay to be vulnerable in that way. So I want to do something real quick here, just kind of a temperature check. Where were you where are you now compared to where you were 5 years ago in terms of transparency? And what I want you to do is I want you to rate yourself, and then I want you to rate your company, all right? 0 to 10, 10 being full disclosure, right? So in the chat box now, if you could, just put your rate yourself with 1 number, and then your second number will be rating your company. If you could put those in there so we can kind of get a feel for where you are and how far you've come in terms of transparency and building trust. Jess, can you share a little bit of that with me?
Yes, absolutely. Looks like we've got one answer, rate yourself. We have a 10 with rate your company as a 3. Then we've got another response that is the self is a 5, company is an 8. And then another individual who says it's even, Steven, 9 for yourself, 9 for the company. And then another coming in, rate yourself at an 8, and then the company at 9. So it looks like most folks, oh, another one, here we go, a 7 for self and a 2 for the company. And then, oh, here we go, another one at a 7 for self, 7 for company. So most answers for self, between the 6 and the 9 range. And then the company, either a high, looks like kind of a split group of a 8 or a 9 for company, or a 2 or a 3 for company.
Okay. Okay, great, great. Thank you. So we have a lot of transparency in the growth over time, and then we have some areas of opportunity, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And I'm here for any questions that you may have when we finish up here, on how you may step into that a little bit more. How do you cultivate that? How do you make that happen? So thank you for sharing. Some questions you may want to ask yourself in terms of where your transparency falls is: do my employees know why we're making the decisions we're making? Is that being communicated? Another question may be, does your organization have clearly defined wages by roles? That's often a question. That's often a curiosity with the employees. Another is, are career paths identified and discussed with the staff? Right? So those are some things to ask yourself, maybe to open up some areas of greater transparency. If you can really take the time to evaluate where your current level of transparency is and the current level of your company, you might find it valuable to shift towards more openness. Could really help with your retention strategies. So think about, really reflect on where you are and where your company is. That is a big key to retention right there, is transparency. Moving on, and probably one of, if you haven't noticed, either by the way I'm communicating, because I've often been told, wow, you sound like a coach, or because I actually have about 20 years of collegiate coaching experience in my first life. Another way to build trust through transparency is adopting a coaching mindset. Always. Coaching mindset builds trust, and it's really needed to create the strong, productive individuals and teams that you're looking to create. Today's workforce, honestly, does not want a boss. I can relate to that. I remember at times when I had people coming up to me say, hey boss, how you doing? And in fact, because I was a coach, I loved it when people saw me or addressed me as a coach in that manner, because it told me a couple things. One, it was endearing, but two, it told me that I was on the right path when they called me coach versus boss. There was a distinct difference between those two and my relationship with my individuals. Those who called me boss, I realized I needed to cultivate that relationship more, build trust there, collaboration. Those who called me a coach, there was a distinct endearing connection there where there was discretionary effort, and I could see them going above and beyond, and I could see them more vulnerable and willing to make mistakes and own up to them. So there's a distinct difference there between a coach and a boss, and why it's so important to really adopt that coaching mindset. And coaching is about getting up close and getting involved with them. It's a relationship that, if appropriate, obviously, it creates trusting relationships. A few common practices that coaches employ, I'm going to walk through right now, are they reinforce the rules of the game, the rules of play, meaning that everybody understands their expectations. They know their roles. They know exactly what they're doing within their business unit, for their job, whatever it may be. They reinforce those rules of play. They also create a safe practice environment. And I want to pause here for a second. This is a big one. This is about compassionate leadership. Compassion being the combination, between empathy and putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and accountability, standing for someone in their excellence, not necessarily holding them accountable. Our words have leverage, but standing for someone in excellence, right? Creating an environment where they could go big, and if they make mistakes, it's okay. They learn, they grow, it's part of it, and they get better the next time around. So really creating a safe environment. And next would be providing encouragement. And what I mean by that is, look, I know maybe you're struggling. I know you've made a mistake, but guess what? I believe in you. And more importantly, I'm so proud of the progress you've made. Those are words that go so far. And I'm sure all of you can remember a time when those exact words were said to you. And if so, you remember them because, unfortunately, they're too far and few between nowadays. Being able to recognize and acknowledge growth and really to provide encouragement is part of a coaching mindset that builds trust, that builds transparency, and that literally feeds into retention big time. The next would be to allow individuals the ownership of their role or on the team, right? They realize they own their particular responsibility. It creates discretionary effort. That trust creates that effort that they're willing to go above and beyond anything their role description is, right? So really being able to allow them ownership of their role. Step away, trust. It's about trust. And last, they build a group responsibility around team. So although they may be in competition, they may be in competition with sales results, what have you, they understand that when they win, their team wins. When their team wins, they win. And they also understand that they are as strong as their weakest link. So it's a team environment. They have a very keen way, coaching has a very keen way of cultivating a team environment, which goes a lot further in terms of ROI and productivity than you could ever imagine with an individual on their own. So adopting a coaching mindset, critical to trust through transparency and retention efforts. One thing I want to say is if you're managing behind the desk, do not be surprised if you're not seeing the impact of your leadership. You want to see and feel and taste the trust needed to create engagement, to create successful, engaged team, and to create a culture of retention. Sitting behind the desk will not get that done. Your team needs to feel your influence right there with them every day, consistently. And they need to be on the field. They need to be in there with their team. They never ask their team to do something or to be something that they wouldn't themselves, right? And they're in it with them every step of the way. Now, they may not be in it directly with them in person. Say maybe they're remote, maybe it's a field force out in the field, but your team always feels your presence when you have a coaching mindset. And this mindset embodies what it means to create trust and loyalty and retention. So a coaching mindset is critical to improving retention. Another way to build trust through transparency are stay interviews. And I call it intentional proactive communication, which literally improves the relationship, the depth, the transparency, the vulnerability with your people. The implementation of stay interviews goes well beyond the traditional exit interviews, right? So you're asking yourself, well, what is a stay interview? Well, the stay interview is a strategy that attempts to find the real reasons people stay or they consider leaving before they walk out the door. Exit interview, they're gone, they're done. You may get information, but this is about really improving the culture in the organization, little bites at a time, all the way through the course of the year, and not once at a mid-year or once at a year in review, but allows you really to bond with individuals to find out what's working, what may not be working, right? Today, stay interviews are much more popular than they've ever been before. So stay interviews are usually done mid-year or more frequent, and it's an opportunity to check in with your managers, to get a pulse, to build stronger relationships. Let's talk about a few things about what a stay interview entails. So first of all, you want to ask open-ended questions. So a stay interview isn't about, a yes or a no question that gives you a yes or a no answer, right? It's an open-ended question, and we'll walk through a couple of what those look like. And what I'm going to ask you to do as well, if you like some examples of those stay interviews in the chat box, go ahead and enter your name and your email address. And what we will do is, one, we'll send you a list of the stay interview questions. And we'll also offer to get on a call with you if you'd be interested in talking a little bit about how to deploy those with your workforce. Another thing to think about is to start these as informal, casual, comfortable conversations. Why is that important? You're using stay interviews to cultivate trust and transparency, not speculation. So these out of the blue would not work, and we don't have time to sit there for hours on end. So these are very short, anything between 5 and 30 minutes, open-ended questions where you get to ask them about their experience, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly, everything, to get a feel. And they want to be, you want to be upfront. Remember the why we talked about? This is why we're doing stay interviews. We want to figure out how to make this the best place to work. We want to duplicate things or replicate things, that are working, and we want to take things that may not be and find another way to do these things. So be open and transparent with them about that. They're usually done 30, 60, 90 days, and then maybe again at 6 months and 18 months. And you usually want to start with the newest employees and kind of work through the tenured employees. And most importantly here, and I want to emphasize this, it is very important to make sure that you have the right person conducting the stay interviews, okay? Somebody who is able to be objective and not judgmental. You want to think about the cadence and the appropriate timing of these as well. Not too close, not a big gap, but really spread out through the course of the year like we talked about. 30, 60, 90 for new employees, 6 months, 18 months, really in between that mid-year and that in-year, the in-year review, to kind of get a feel. So this is a great way to build trust and transparency and to improve retention along the way without having to wait for an exit interview to find out maybe what wasn't working or what was working. So a few examples of here, and again, if you type your name and email address in the chat box, we'll send these to you. But a few examples of good stay interview questions would be, what do you look forward to when you come to work each day, right? Maybe tell me about a great day you had at work recently. Maybe tell me about a frustrating day that you had at work, very valuable. If you could change anything about your job, what would it be? Be open to that. Are there any resources that I could provide you that would support you? And then again, go ahead and type in the chat box, and we'll make sure we get those over to you. Or at least get on a phone call with you and support you in ways to implement these with your teams and with your workforce. Now, being the coach I was and being very passionate about leadership development and teamwork and culture, I want to make sure to emphasize that another way to build trust through transparency is to bring back team building. It's always the very first line item to be dismissed as not essential. I've seen it. I've been in companies where that's the case, but I've also been in companies on the flip side where team building is very much at the forefront of engagement, and it really makes a difference with retention. So think about team building as essential skills, essential experiences to really bond your employees, to welcome new hires. And, you know, when you're communicating at that level that often, you're finding things too. It's almost like a little stay interview that's happening all year long when you're doing these activities. So a few examples of that would be create friendly games and competitions. My last company I was at, I used to run big leadership development trainings with 200-300 people, and what we'd have them do is go on a scavenger hunt. So they would go and they'd go find out, you know, what does sales planning and analytics do? What does our marketing team do? And they get to know people. They'd find out about other people's roles, and they'd come back and they'd share that with each other. So it was kind of a fun team building opportunity. Another was post staff pictures boards, staff picture boards, or share photos of new hires, their family, their friends, their pets. That's a way to open up set a culture of transparency and get to know each other on a different level besides just the role you play at work. And the last is make new friends. I don't know about you guys, but there's a lot of people I didn't know that I worked with. Maybe they had different personalities than I did. Maybe they worked in different areas, different business units that I did. So really step into finding a new work friend, reaching out to someone, get to know somebody that you don't know or that you wouldn't typically get to know, and great things are uncovered. One, trust, transparency, and really feeding into retention. Now, lastly, I want a hard pause here for a second. Lastly, and most importantly, and please listen closely to this, stop allowing your staff to eat their young. I know some of you are probably laughing right now. It is the most important thing to think about. It will kill your culture. It will kill your retention. Stop allowing hazing. Sometimes we know about it, sometimes we don't. You can't let it happen on your watch. It cannot happen. Don't allow anybody in your organization to treat staff disrespectfully, doing grunt work, talking down to them. Your new hires, they're flight risks. I mean, really, any hire is a flight risk, but your new hires, they have no deep roots. There's no obligation to stay there, and they'll leave in a heartbeat to go find another opportunity. So correct this right away. The cost of turnover, I mean, think about the cost of training for a new hire, down the drain if you don't nip this in the bud. Make sure there's no staff speaking down, no staff speaking poorly. And I think about this, a lot of times we place new hires with some of our seasoned employees or most successful employees, okay? Well, what we're asking for new hires to be placed with mentors, so to speak. Someone who knows the job, someone who understands the ins and outs of the company, somebody who's on board and supports your culture and your company, right? A lot of time we think seasoned or successful, those are different competencies than mentoring. Mentoring is a competency, and performing in sales is a competency. And we have to remember to discern between the two when we put a new hire with a staff member, okay? We want somebody who's supportive, who understands the role, and really supports your culture. Now, if you know of somebody in your company who's speaking poorly, who's a cancer within your culture, you have to step in. There's no way around it. You have to step in and stop the cancer. Think about the costs of what are the benefits of having a cancerous employee? There's none. There's the cost of it. Actually, most of the time, severance from the company is usually the answer. Now look, it's not an easy thing to do, especially if you have senior leaders and you've known them for a while and you know their families. But if they're not coachable and they're miserable and they're making the culture miserable and your name, your brand, your reputation's at stake, and your new hires turnover's at stake, sometimes it's best to let them go. And oftentimes it's usually the best answer for both parties. So remember, it's an employee market right now, right? This type of behavior, I'm going to tell you, they'll leave and go find another opportunity. So don't let it fester. Step in and address it and make sure that you're protecting your new hires, you're treating them with respect, and in turn, that will lead to a lot of respect from other employees, and most importantly, retention. Retention. That's what we're looking at right now, is workforce retention. So to wrap this up here, there is a direct link between trust and tenure. Be transparent, be open, be authentic, overshare more than undershare, but be authentic. Transparency creates trust, and trust creates loyalty. You'll get that discretionary effort that you want when you build that trust and that loyalty. And loyalty extends the tenure a little bit longer. Now, what is your priority, right? If you're anything like me, you get on these and you're involved and you're engaged and you take notes and you're ready to roll, and there's something that sparks, you're like, I got to do this. And then you go and chase a squirrel and you get on something else and then you completely forget it, right? So what I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to challenge you to do, is jump on 2 or 3 of these and think about how you can plan and plan ahead and schedule time to really dive into these things and to apply them and to get this ball rolling, right? Maybe it's a fix-it Friday. I've heard some companies that tend to do that. They spend Friday really digging into 1 or 2 specific areas to implement so they don't get off track and head in another direction and forget to do the things that they know they really need to do for retention purposes. So I really challenge you to pick a day, pick a couple of these, plan on it, and put some of this stuff into action. Employee turnover, the cost of turnover is way too high not to pause and plan for some of these things. Now, will it stop the revolving door? No, but it'll slow it. And, you know, there's a lot to do, and it takes time, so don't get discouraged with it. Take one little shift at a time, and you can really create a culture of retention. So that's all I have right now. Jess, do we have any questions?
Well, that was so fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing, Laura. Really good bits of advice, and I hope you guys pulled some strategies through those. We do have a couple questions that came in during the session. So this first one says, I've not always been transparent with my staff. What's the first step in becoming more transparent?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, I've always had the belief that in order to be a great leader, you almost have to be a mirror for your team and for your individuals. And so we mirror each other. So the first step starts with you. And you get to really ask the questions. Why don't I want to be more transparent? What am I trying to hide? What am I afraid of? What am I holding back on, right? And then you'll see the more transparent, the more you're willing to share your wins, your losses, your mistakes, to be vulnerable. You're going to see that's a mirror, and your team is going to start showing up that way too. So I would say it starts with you, and share your mistakes. Share, I mean, we're not perfect. This whole idea of perfection is crazy in the world. It trips up a lot of us, and the more transparent and the more authentic we are, and the more environment we create with our teams and transparency. So yeah.
Excellent. And this another one is kind of from a different perspective. It sounds like they've got a supervisor that is not transparent. So the question is, how do I get my supervisor to be more transparent?
Yeah.
So kind of
Yeah.
working up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a little bit tougher one. I actually teach a course on omnidirectional communication. The reason I feel that's important is because oftentimes we can share, well, sometimes it's hard to share feedback with our peers as a manager. It's super easy at times to share feedback with our subordinates as managers. But to communicate up is a whole different ballgame, and it's touchy. I would say the exact same thing. Sometimes it takes the courage of a manager to step into vulnerability and say, you know, this is very hard for me to communicate this to you. Is there something that's bothering me? Can I sit and talk to you a little bit? And be authentic. Share with that. 9 out of 10 times you're going to find that supervisors, if somebody were to come in and really be authentic and vulnerable, most of the time they'll meet them there too. So remember, you know, managers influence up as much as supervisors influence down. We're all influencing each other. And until we really step into that and start communicating in that way, yeah, there's going to be a hierarchy and people are going to be afraid to voice what they want. And there'll be a lack of transparency. And then that's when turnover, that's when retention goes down the drain, really.
Yeah, I totally couldn't agree with you more. And that looks like that's all the questions. If you guys have any extra ones, please feel free to go and throw those in the chat box as I just kind of finish up with our conclusion here. But Laura, thank you so much for delivering our message today, and for all of you for visiting the virtual training session. I hope there's just a little nugget that you can pull out and just start working on. And like Laura said, there is so much that we can do to be a better manager. And let's face it, management's really hard. So if we can just grab a few things to try out for a different thing for every week, or, you know, if something doesn't work now, it might work in 6 months. So for all of our magnet strategies that we've covered in this series, those are all found in Kara Soletto's book, Staying Power. So if you're looking for more material, that is a really great place to start. If you'd like to order this, you can go to Amazon, get it. Staying Power is the title of the book there on the slide. And if you wanted bulk pricing to hand these out to all your managers, that would be another great option that we found our clients really like too. So sign up for our newsletter by going to our website, crescendostrategies.com. You again will get those valuable retention resources, and then looking at our YouTube page frequently, as well as LinkedIn, to catch some weekly retention tips. And thank you all again so much for joining us today, and have a great one. Thanks,
Yeah,
Laura.
take care. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.